People think quiet men are harmless. They assume silence means weakness, shyness, or lack of confidence. But that's the first mistake the world makes. Quiet people aren't weak. They're watching. They're studying every move, every lie, every insecurity in the room. And while everyone else exposes themselves through noise, the quiet one stays hidden behind a wall no one can climb. That's why people fear him, even if they never say it out loud. Most people talk to feel powerful. They argue to look strong. They react instantly because they're controlled by emotion. But the quiet one doesn't react. He doesn't rush. He doesn't show anything. And when you can't predict a man, you can't control him. That's where the fear begins, not from what he says, but from what he doesn't say. Silence forces people to face their own insecurities. It makes them overthink, overspeak, over-explain. They end up revealing more about themselves than they ever intended, while the quiet one reveals nothing. Quiet men build power the same way storms build pressure, slowly, silently, invisibly. You never see the moment they decide something. You just feel the shift. One minute they're quietly observing, the next minute they make a move that flips the entire situation. They don't need noise to create impact. Their presence alone changes the room. Their silence becomes tension. Their calmness becomes intimidation. Their lack of reaction becomes a threat on its own. People fear the quiet ones because silence gives them the upper hand. When someone doesn't respond, you start responding for them. When they don't explain, you start imagining. When they don't break, you start doubting yourself. And that's the truth most people can't handle. The quiet man isn't avoiding the world. He's evaluating it. He's not emotionally numb. He's emotionally disciplined. He's not disengaged. He's calculating quietly, storing information, remembering every detail. The world fears the quiet ones because noise is easy to fight. Silence? Silence is impossible. You can't argue with it. You can't read it. You can't defeat it. Silence exposes more truth than confrontation ever will. And the man who carries silence like a weapon becomes someone people don't just respect. They avoid provoking. Silence is not empty. It's a psychological weapon most men never learn to use because they're too addicted to hearing themselves talk. But the quiet ones, they understand the power hidden inside stillness. When a man doesn't react, people around him start reacting for him. They start guessing, assuming, projecting. Their mind becomes loud in the presence of someone whose mind is calm, and that mental imbalance is the real reason quiet people make others uncomfortable. Humans hate the unknown. They fear what they can't read. When someone is silent, your brain tries to fill the silence with meaning. It starts asking questions. What is he thinking? Does he disagree? Is he judging me? Did I say something wrong? That internal chaos happens automatically, and while people are busy fighting their own thoughts, the quiet one is simply observing. He doesn't need to threaten anyone. Their own insecurity becomes the threat. Most people speak without thinking. Quiet people think without speaking. That's why their presence feels heavier. They don't waste words. They don't overshare. And they don't give you emotional access so easily. Their silence creates a psychological mirror, forcing others to confront their own motives and flaws. When someone talks to a quiet man, they start hearing the truth about themselves in their own words. And that's terrifying for someone who isn't used to being exposed. A quiet man's silence becomes a test, and people fail it without realizing. They start talking too much, trying too hard, explaining things no one asked for. They feel an urge to fill the space he leaves open, because silence feels like judgment. They try to impress him, convince him, or earn his reaction. But nothing works. The lack of reaction makes them feel small, and that feeling creates fear. If I can't read him, I can't predict him. If I can't predict him, I can't control him. Quiet people know this instinctively. They don't interrupt. They don't rush to respond. They let others reveal their intentions, their insecurities, their lies, and their weaknesses. Most people expose more in 5 minutes of nervous talking than they would in 5 hours of interrogation. And the quiet man collects all of it. That's why silence is superior to aggression. It gives you information without giving anything in return. There's another layer to this fear. People assume silence means deeper thinking. Whether true or not, they project intelligence onto the quiet one. They assume he's analyzing them. They assume he's ahead of them. They assume he knows something they don't. And fear grows faster in assumption than in reality. When people feel outsmarted, even without proof, they become anxious. They overcompensate. They bend. They expose more. And the quiet man gains more power without lifting a finger. People also fear silence because it forces honesty. When there's no noise to hide behind, lies become obvious. When there's no reaction to manipulate, emotional games fall apart. When someone doesn't rise to the bait, the manipulator loses control. This is why toxic people, egotistical people, insecure people, and attention seekers can't stand quiet ones. Silence neutralizes them. Noise empowers them. Quiet people are immune to manipulation, and that immunity feels threatening to anyone who relies on emotional chaos to dominate. Silence is pressure. Silence is truth. Silence is exposure. That's why people fear the quiet ones, not because they are weak, but because their stillness forces others to confront everything they usually avoid facing. Quiet men don't create fear intentionally. They just refuse to run from the truth everyone else is hiding from. That's why silence isn't emptiness. It's insight. And insight is dangerous. When someone's silence can reveal you, you learn to fear the one who doesn't need to speak. Most people explode under pressure. They raise their voice, their breathing changes, their face reacts instantly. You can see every emotion written across them like an open book. But the quiet ones, they don't give you that luxury. You can't provoke them. You can't shake them. They don't react the way the world expects. And that emotional control makes people deeply uncomfortable. When a man doesn't break under pressure, people feel powerless around him. Emotional discipline is rare. Most people live on impulse. They get angry too fast, offended too easily, and triggered by every small thing. Their emotions betray them before their words ever do. But the quiet man operates differently. He doesn't let emotions make decisions for him. He observes the situation while everyone else reacts to it. And when a man can stay calm when others can't, it sends an unmistakable message. He's stronger than all of us. People fear what they can't influence. When someone doesn't react, you can't control their state. You can't pull them into your emotional frame. You can't manipulate their response. Their stillness becomes a wall you can't climb. That's why emotionally controlled men appear intimidating even when they're doing nothing at all. Their calmness forces others to reveal their true selves while they reveal nothing. This fear becomes even stronger in conflict. When tension rises, most people panic, talk faster, or get louder. They show you the exact moment they feel threatened. But the quiet one doesn't move. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't try to dominate the room. Instead, he becomes even calmer. That calmness flips the power dynamic instantly. The person who controls his emotions controls the entire situation. People expect arguments. They expect reactions. They expect a fight. But silence during conflict is the one thing they're not ready for. When someone refuses to be dragged into emotional chaos, the aggressor loses influence. Their anger starts to look ridiculous. Their threats sound desperate. Their confidence collapses because they can't get a response. And the quiet man becomes the anchor everyone subconsciously gravitates toward. This is why emotional stability feels so threatening. It's not just calmness. It's psychological dominance. When a man doesn't react, it signals that he isn't afraid, he isn't insecure, and he isn't dependent on approval. You can't intimidate him into submission. You can't guilt-trip him into compliance. You can't manipulate him through emotional pressure. That level of control is rare, and rarity breeds fear. People also know that emotionally disciplined individuals strike with precision. They don't waste energy. They don't escalate needlessly. They choose the exact moment to respond. And when they do, it's decisive. Quiet men don't fight every battle. They fight the ones that matter. And they win because they're not blinded by emotion when the moment arrives. When someone can't be provoked, you know one thing for sure. He's dangerous in a way loud men never will be. People fear quiet men for one simple reason. You can't read them. Humans depend on predictability. They need to know what someone thinks, how they feel, and what they might do next to feel safe. Loud people give you all of this instantly. They show their insecurity, their ego, their anger, their intentions with every word and every reaction. But the quiet one, he gives you nothing. No clues, no signals, no emotional leaks. And when a man doesn't show his hand, everyone else starts questioning their own. The unreadable man creates mental instability. People begin analyzing him, trying to decode him, trying to figure out what's behind that calm face and silent posture. But there's nothing to analyze, because he's not broadcasting anything, and that emptiness terrifies people. When someone won't reveal their thoughts, others start projecting their own fears onto him. They imagine he's judging them, analyzing them, or planning something they can't predict. Silence becomes a blank screen where everyone's insecurities start playing. You want to know why this is so powerful? Because unpredictability is the oldest form of psychological dominance. When people can't guess your next move, they treat you cautiously. They overthink around you. They avoid provoking you. They respect you automatically because their mind refuses to treat an unreadable man casually. When you don't show your emotions, people assume you're stronger than them. When you don't explain yourself, people assume you don't need validation. When you don't react, people assume you're thinking 10 steps ahead. This is the secret quiet men carry without even trying. When you reveal nothing, people assume everything. Unreadability also destroys manipulation. Manipulators rely on emotional reactions to know which buttons to press. They test you with guilt. They push you with anger. They probe you with pressure. But if you stay unreadable, if you don't respond the way they expect, they lose control. Their strategies collapse. Their confidence dies. You become a target they can't move, a mind they can't penetrate. And nothing scares a manipulator more than losing access to someone's emotions. Unreadability also makes people respect you differently. When you only speak with purpose, your words carry weight. When you stay silent, people pay closer attention. When you finally express your opinion, it hits harder because you're not someone who talks just to talk. Loud men need to be heard. Quiet men choose when to be heard. That choice itself is power. People also fear the possibility that the quiet one sees more than he lets on. Silent observers notice everything: body language, tone, inconsistencies, hidden motives, and deep down, people know this. They know the quiet one sees the truth behind their words. They know he catches what others miss, and being seen that clearly makes people nervous, even if nothing is said. The truth is simple. People don't fear the quiet ones because they are silent. They fear them because silence makes them unpredictable, and unpredictable men are the only men the world can't control. Dominance doesn't always come from force. Sometimes it comes from presence, the kind that doesn't need volume, movement, or performance. Loud men chase attention. Quiet men attract it. They don't demand the room adjusts to them. This isn't magic. It's psychology. Humans instinctively respond to the one person who doesn't compete, doesn't rush, doesn't lose himself in noise. The quiet one creates his own gravity, and people feel it even before he speaks. Stillness is misunderstood. People think being still means being passive, but real stillness is control. Control of your energy, your reactions, your impulses. When a quiet man enters a space, he doesn't scatter himself across the room the way loud people do. He stays centered, grounded. That calm center becomes a contrast against everyone else's frantic presence, and contrast creates dominance. People lower their voice around him, adjust their tone, become more careful with their words. They don't know why, they just do it. Quiet dominance works because silence creates pressure. When someone stays still and focused, everyone else feels exposed. They start questioning how they're standing, how they're talking, how they're being perceived. The quiet man doesn't create tension intentionally. He just refuses to break it. And most people can't handle unbroken tension. They start bending under it. They try to impress. They try to joke. They try to over-explain. They try to make him react in some way, any way, just to relieve the pressure. That's when the quiet man gains power without trying. People start adapting to him. They shift their behavior around him. They think before speaking. They look for his reactions, his approval, his cues. They don't realize it, but they begin calibrating themselves to his emotional climate. That's dominance, not the kind you force, the kind people give you naturally, because your presence disrupts their patterns. Quiet men also command attention because they conserve their energy instead of bleeding it out. Loud men get exhausted. They burn themselves trying to win every conversation, dominate every moment, prove something constantly. The quiet man wastes nothing. Every word is intentional. Every glance has meaning. Every action is deliberate. When someone uses their energy sparingly, people assume they must have a lot more power stored inside. This is why quiet dominance is more threatening than loud aggression. Loud aggression is predictable. You know where it comes from. Insecurity, ego, lack of control. But quiet dominance? That comes from discipline. It comes from someone who doesn't need recognition to validate himself. It comes from someone who can enter a room and shift the energy without saying a word. People don't fear him because of what he does. They fear him because of what he could do. The most powerful man in any room is the one who doesn't need to perform. His stillness is strength. His silence is warning. His presence is the reminder that real dominance isn't loud, it's felt. Quiet men are not silent because they have nothing to say. They're silent because they don't waste energy on people who don't deserve access to their mind. Their silence isn't passiveness, it's selection. They choose where to speak, when to speak, and who is worth speaking to. And this selective behavior gets mistaken for weakness by fools and recognized as power by the wise. Once you understand that quietness is a strategy, not a personality flaw, the entire world starts making more sense. Most people react instantly to everything. A comment, a provocation, an insult, a misunderstanding, and they jump. They explain, defend, attack, argue. But the quiet one evaluates. He watches the situation unfold before he makes his move. He doesn't give people the satisfaction of immediate access to his emotions. He doesn't let manipulators know which buttons work. He refuses to play the psychological games others rely on. Silence becomes his shield, and timing becomes his weapon. Silence gives a man leverage, but strategy gives him control. A quiet man doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks to create impact. When he responds, finally, people pay attention because they know he doesn't talk just to fill space. And that scarcity makes his words valuable. It's the same principle that makes diamonds rare. The more selective you are with your words, the more powerful your voice becomes. Quietness also protects a man from unnecessary battles. Loud men wage war on everything, every disagreement, every opinion, every slight. They drain themselves, fighting meaningless fights. Quiet men conserve their strength. They don't respond to foolishness. They don't correct every lie. They don't chase validation. They save their energy for battles where the outcome actually matters. And in those moments, because they're rested and focused, they win fast and decisively. Another part of the strategy lies in information. Quiet men gather it. Loud men give it away. A quiet man listens, observes, notices inconsistencies, remembers details others forget. While people are talking freely, revealing their motives and insecurities, he is building a mental map of the entire situation. That's why his silence is dangerous. It is not empty, it's processing, and you never know what conclusions he's reaching. Strategic silence also changes how people treat you. When you don't respond emotionally, people start revealing who they really are. They show their impatience, their need for dominance, their insecurity, their true intentions. You don't have to expose them. They expose themselves voluntarily, and all you had to do was sit still and say nothing. This is why silence is not passive. It's a trap. A quiet man watches people dig their own grave with their own words. He collects information, stores it, and waits for the moment it becomes useful. That's what separates quiet men from everyone else. They don't react to the world. They position themselves to control it. The loud man fights every storm. The quiet man waits for the storm, then decides whether he even needs to step outside. Quiet men rise in hierarchies, not because they chase power, but because power naturally shifts toward those who don't waste themselves. In every group, workplace, friendship circle, family, team, watch closely, and you'll see the same pattern. The loud ones burn out, the emotional ones implode, the arrogant ones get exposed. But the quiet one stays steady. He doesn't compete. He doesn't flex. He doesn't scramble for position. He simply watches, waits, and moves only when it benefits him. And that patience is exactly what elevates him above everyone else. People make the mistake of thinking hierarchy is decided by personality. It's not. It's decided by consistency. Loud men are inconsistent. Their emotions shift. Their confidence fluctuates. Their decisions change under pressure. But the quiet one stays the same. That stability becomes intimidating in a world full of chaos. People naturally trust the man who doesn't panic, doesn't crumble, and doesn't overreact. Trust becomes influence. Influence becomes authority, and authority becomes power, without him ever needing to ask for it. Another reason quiet men rise is because they gather more information than anyone else. while the loud ones are exposing everything, their plans, their weaknesses, their intentions. The quiet one keeps his cards close. He studies people, analyzes behavior patterns, observes alliances forming, and notes who's loyal and who's not. This awareness makes him 10 steps ahead without ever making a scene. When conflict arises, he already knows who will fold, who will fight, and who will switch sides. Quiet men also avoid unnecessary enemies. Loud men create conflict just by existing. They argue over nothing. They take things personally. They escalate drama. Quiet men don't. They stay neutral, calm, and controlled. They don't get dragged into ego battles. They don't speak impulsively. They don't reveal their position until they're absolutely sure of the outcome. That's why they outlast everyone, because emotional men destroy themselves long before the quiet man ever has to lift a finger. Hierarchy rewards the man who understands timing. Quiet men move when the timing is perfect. Not early, not late. They wait until everyone else has exhausted themselves with noise, and then they make a clean, precise move that changes everything. People say the quiet ones got lucky, but luck has nothing to do with it. It's patience, observation, and restraint disguised as luck. And there's one more truth. Quiet men hold psychological weight. When they speak, people listen. When they disagree, people reconsider. When they say no, people stop pushing. Because they don't speak often, their words feel heavier. Because they don't react emotionally, their decisions seem more grounded. Because they're unreadable, people hesitate to test them. This hesitation creates a natural hierarchy with the quiet one at the top. The loud man wins attention. The aggressive man wins fear. But the quiet man wins respect. And respect turns into real power. Quiet power is real, but it's fragile. Not because others can break it, but because a quiet man can destroy it himself if he isn't careful. The moment silence becomes arrogance, the moment stillness becomes superiority, the moment unreadability becomes isolation, the power collapses. Quiet strength works only when it's rooted in awareness, not ego. And this is the final rule most men never understand. When a quiet man starts thinking he's above everyone else, he stops observing. He stops learning. He stops staying adaptable. He becomes predictable in a different way. Predictable in his pride. And pride is the one weakness that can break even the calmest mind. Silence is powerful because it's controlled. But if silence becomes a shield to hide insecurity or laziness, it loses its edge. People can feel the difference between true restraint and empty withdrawal. The quiet ones who rise are the ones who stay self-aware. They don't cling to silence for identity. They use it as a tool. They speak when necessary, act when required, and step forward when the moment demands strength. They don't confuse being unreadable with being unapproachable. They don't allow silence to make them disconnected from reality. Real power requires presence, not disappearance. The world fears quiet men because quiet men reveal others. But if a quiet man refuses to reveal himself at all, even when it matters, he stops being powerful and starts becoming irrelevant. Silence is only dominance when it comes from understanding, not fear. When it comes from discipline, not apathy. When it comes from strategy, not avoidance. This is the final law. Quietness is strength only when you control it, not when it controls you. A man who owns his silence becomes someone no one can manipulate. A man who hides behind silence becomes someone even he cannot trust. People don't fear the quiet ones because they are silent. People fear them because silence exposes everyone else. and protects the one who knows how to use it. But the moment silence becomes ego, the protection disappears. Master your silence. Don't worship it. That is the final boundary between quiet power and quiet destruction.